All right. So, last Wednesday, someone rudely texted me in the middle of the lecture and stopped the recording. I'm not going to say who. I don't like embarrassing people too much, but you know who you are, Larry. So anyways, this week we are going over Revelation and natural theology and the Kalam cosmological argument. Revelation, not the book of, but Revelation simply just means God making himself known. And so that is what Revelation is, God making himself known. We have two forms of revelation that is widely accepted, is general versus special revelation. General revelation is creation, and conscience is given is available to everyone everywhere. So we know that God exists from creation around us and the conscience in our own minds. Special revelation is Christ plus Scripture given to specific people in specific times. That is special revelation, and that's why it's important for us to take the gospel and to translate the Bible. Hebrews 1 through 12. Long ago, at many times, in many ways, God spoke to our fathers by the prophets, but in these last days, he has spoken to us by his Son. General point. Yes. So general revelation tells you a God exists. Special revelation tells you who he is. We trust Scripture as God's inspired word. At least that's how 2 Timothy 3:16 put it. God has never been silent. The question is, how loudly and to whom has he spoke? So, natural theology. Natural theology is using reason or arguments to argue or reason for God's existence from what's plain to everyone. Romans 1:19 through 20. For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made. It is taking what we know from the world and from reason and applying it to God and reasoning that to what God must be like. So that's natural theology. So far we have general revelation, special revelation, and natural theology. Paul himself on Mars Hill, or at the Areopagus, the hill itself is Mars Hill. The building is called the Areopagus. It's funny because both of those things are named after, one's after the Greek and one's after the Roman gods of war. And I find it interesting, and I think this is kind of might be why it was named this, is that this is a place where ideas came to war. The Greek met the Roman, and now the Jewish or the Christian mindset is coming in as well. And so Paul reasoned from creation before he ever mentioned the resurrection. In Acts 17:24 through 28, this is a summary of that. The God who made the world and everything in it, he himself gives to all mankind life and breath and everything. He is actually not far from each one of us. Paul himself did natural theology at Mars Hill. He reasoned from creation and common human experiences before he ever got to the resurrection. The resurrection, the gospel is a stumbling block to the Jews because it was so outside of what they believed and what outside the realm. So that's why we have these beginning rounds that we like to start from to build up to the gospel. So our toolbox ahead in the coming weeks. Yes, here it is. So our natural theology is going to continue for a couple weeks. So we have the cosmological argument, so the universe having a cause, that is today. The teleological argument from fine-tuning, that is fine-tuning, that the universe is so perfectly tuned for life, or just existence in general, that if one part was off slightly, then we wouldn't be here today. The moral argument, that if there is at least one thing that is objectively morally true, that it is wrong to torture children for fun, if that is wrong to do without the mind, without human consensus, if every human tomorrow was like, we're going to start doing this, if it's still technically wrong, then God must exist. And then Pascal's wager, a different kind of case from what's rational to wager on. We'll get to that one as well. None of these arguments alone hands you the Trinity or the resurrection. That's expected, and it's fine. They build a rational case for a creator. A special revelation fills in who that creator is. So our job is essentially to do the groundwork here with natural theology and general revelation to move away the barriers to get people to the cross. Think of it like a detective work. A detective doesn't need a confession to build a case. The evidence itself, the fingerprints, motive, opportunity, can point clearly to one suspect. Natural theology works the same way with the universe itself as evidence. So, one memorable line that I've heard is, you don't need a Bible to notice the evidence. You just need to follow it. Romans 2:14, when Gentiles who do not by nature have the law, when they do what the law commands, they show that they are a law unto themselves, and that the will of the Father is written on their hearts. And on the day of judgment, their conscience will either accuse them or even excuse them. And so at the end of this life, it is possible, I'm not saying that many people do come this way to salvation, but it's at least possible that someone will be saved through the moral law written on their hearts, and what they know about God from the world around us. Job himself. Job is believed to be the oldest book in the Bible. There is no mention of the Abrahamic covenant. There's no mention of the Mosaic covenant. There's nothing there that would show the previous special revelation being known by Job. But yet, he knew God, believed in God based on the world around him, so much so that he was blameless before the Lord. Of course, he was blamed. He had things he did wrong, but he still was saved based off of the natural revelation. This is why we still need Christ. Christ had to die to atone for that because he still had sin. So there is still no way to come to salvation without Christ. But this Romans 2 at least shows that it's possible to come to salvation without consciously knowing the name or the acts of Christ. So our next question is, did the universe have a beginning? Did the universe have a beginning? Ancient Greek philosophers believed matter was eternal and uncreated. God, if he existed, may have organized the cosmos, but he did not create it from nothing. But the ancient Hebrew thought said, as Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So the ancient Hebrews said the universe had a real beginning created by God. And that's exactly what Genesis 1:1 claims. These two traditions collided for over 1,000 years across Jewish, Muslim, and Christian thought on the question of whether the universe had a beginning. Then, in the 12th century, a man named Al-Ghazali came on the scene, and he was a Muslim from Persia who wrote against Greek-influenced philosophers. Denying that God created the universe, his argument, in his own words, every being which begins has a cause for its beginning. Now the world is a being which begins. Therefore, it possesses a cause for its beginning. Simply, every being which begins has a cause for its beginning. And that's what Al-Ghazali said. That is the argument that we will run with today, which is called the Kalam. See what I did there? Like the word Kalam popped into existence, like nothing. Big Bang. Kalam. Yeah, that was only for me. All right. So the Kalam cosmological argument has two premises and a conclusion. Premises work with, I'm going to make two statements, and if you can destroy statement one or statement true, then the conclusion does not follow. But if the statement one is true, if statement true is true, the conclusion follows. So statement one, whatever begins to exist has a cause. Statement one, whatever begins to exist has a cause. Statement two, the universe began to exist. Statement three, or conclusion, therefore, the universe has a cause. So, point one, whatever begins to exist has a cause. Nothing comes from nothing. And we all know this, because if it could, why only universes? Why not bicycles? Why not root beer? No one truly believes things just pop into existence, because every one of us goes home at night, put our key in our door, our house, apartment, shack, whatever you possibly live in, and you open the door with no fear that a tiger has popped into existence in your house. You have no fear whatsoever of that, because you know that, hey, the doors are locked, the windows are fine, that means nothing is inside. I left it how I left it, and nothing popped into existence. Everyone knows that. But science itself assumes causes for the universe's origin. Science assumes the exact same thing. There has to be a reason for something rather than nothing. That if there is something, there had to have been a reason for it. So, the first question is, can the past be infinite? Where is my... Yeah. Can the past actually be infinite? An actual infinite number of things cannot exist in the real world, as opposed to just as an abstract idea as in math. If the past stretches back infinitely, that means an actual infinite of number of past events already happened before today, which is impossible. Take Hilbert's Hotel. Imagine a hotel with an infinite amount of rooms, and every single room has someone living in it. Someone is staying in that hotel room. So the sign out front should say no vacancies anywhere. But a new guest arrives. What do? Well, no problem. The manager moves the guest in room number 1 to room number 2, and the room number 2 to 3, and so on. 3 to 4, 4 to 5, 5 to 6, and so on, infinitum. And now everyone has a room because you just moved them all, an infinite number into an infinite set. That's perfectly fine. So now room number 1 is empty, and the new guest checks in. But it's weird because every moment, every single infinite room was full, but I just made space. That's the absurdity. Now it even gets weirder. Every single room is full. And imagine a bus shows up with an infinite amount of people, right? And this bus runs parallel to the rooms, and it pulls up, and there's doors all over the bus going out. And I need to get this infinite number of people in the bus into the infinite number of rooms, but every single room is full. What do? Well, as the guest services, the manager, right? I tell everyone to move to the room twice your room number, right? 1 goes to 2, 2 goes to 4, 3 goes to 6, 4 goes to 8, and so on. Every room is doubled, and that's where each person is moving to, which does 2 things. That opens up every single odd number is now available. And then also every single prime number is now available. And so everyone in the bus, because there's an infinite number of odd numbers and an infinite number of prime numbers, then I can move everyone from the bus just straight in to those now empty rooms. This is why it's absurd. The sign out front should say no vacancy, guests welcome, because every room is full, which means no vacancy, but guests are still welcome because somehow we can shuffle an infinite and add an infinite to an infinite and get an infinite. Another one is, I don't remember the exact numberage, but let's say the Earth rotates the sun. Yes, the sun is curling through the universe, and we're rotating like this, getting chucked and thrown. But just simple. The Earth is rotating the sun. It takes 1 year for one full rotation. And I don't remember what the actual number is. We're going to say that the Mars takes 3 years. It could be 7. I don't remember. But let's say it takes 3 years for Mars to rotate the sun once. It takes 3 Earth years. Which means that if Mars and Earth have eternally in the past been circling the sun, then they've both infinitely circled the sun. But Mars has circled the sun 3 times less than the Earth. but they have both infinitely circled the sun. That is the absurdity of an actual infinite number of things, because an infinite plus an infinite is still an infinite, or you can even do an infinite minus an infinite is still infinite. In the Hilbert Hotel, if everyone who was originally there, which are now in all of our positive numbers, are gone, they all want to check out. I literally just lost an infinite number of people, but I still have an infinite number of people in all my odd numbers. So the past, having an infinite number of things is not possible. Number two, the impossibility of a countdown. You cannot form an actual infinite by adding one thing at a time. Successive addition. The past is formed exactly that way. One event after another, like dominoes falling. So imagine someone claims to have been counting down from negative infinity, one number per second, and is only now finishing, right? You walk up and they're like -3, -2, -1, 0. Before he could count to 0, he'd have to first count -1. Before he could count -1, he'd have to count -2, right? You guys know how counting works. Before he can count -2, he has to say -3, and so on and so forth to infinitum. He has to start. And for the sake of our minds and understanding, it's like someone counting from 0 and then counting all the negative numbers before counting 0.1, just number 1. Number 1 would be like our present moment. Yesterday, we're going to say 0 is like the present moment. Yesterday is -1. The day before that is -2. Day before that is -3. Okay, continuing that on. If we look into the past, and because we know each day has to happen, just because we got to 0 means there has to be a beginning, because there would always be another number to count before our current number. Yeah. And science, at least, Big Bang cosmology, has shown this. The Big Bang, Einstein, Friedman, Mathieu, I don't know, you guys try to read that word, and Hubble. Tracing the expansion backwards leads to a beginning of space, time, matter, and energy. Einstein's general relativity in 1917, followed by Friedman and Lemaitrie's, models, and Edwin Hubble's observation of galactic redshift, all point in the same direction. The universe is expanding, and tracing that expansion backwards leads to a single point, a single beginning, where time, space, and matter and energy all came into existence at a single moment, at a singularity. Everyone has heard, not everyone, of course, but it's reasonable to assume everyone has heard a ambulance coming towards you. And as it's getting closer, that siren is getting higher pitched, higher and higher and higher pitched. The moment that ambulance passes and it's driving away, it gets lower and lower and lower pitched. That's because as it's getting closer, the wavelengths is getting jammed closer and closer together until they're up here where they're as close as possible. And then the moment it passes me, then the wavelengths coming from it are getting longer and longer between. that is the same thing that happens with light. When a light source is moving away from us, it shifts into the red, where when we're looking at it, it looks more red. When a light source is coming towards us, it shifts into the blue scale. And that is the same thing as the sound. When it's coming closer, the wavelengths get closer, i.e. like the blue. And when it gets moving away, it gets quieter, as in the red. And so that's how they pointed at stars and things, and they were like, all of these things are shifted into the red scale, which means they're moving away. The Born-Guth-Vilenkin theorem in 2003, any universe that has, on average, been expanding throughout its universe cannot be infinite in the past. This includes multiverse proposals. They need a beginning too. Cosmologist Alexander Vilenkin's own conclusion is, quote, none of these scenarios can actually be past eternal. All of the evidence we have says the universe had a beginning. So, yes, Born-Guth-Vilenkin theorem. Second law of thermodynamics. The second law of thermodynamics says, without new energy being added to a system becomes increasingly disoriented over time, eventually reaching a total equilibrium or heat death where no further change is possible. If the universe had existed for infinite time already, it should have reached heat death long ago. It hasn't. Energy is still available, and the universe still has order and structure. The best explanation is the universe hasn't existed forever. It began a finite time ago and has been running down toward equilibrium ever since, right on schedule. So, I think it's the second law of thermodynamics, I believe it is, also states that energy cannot be created or destroyed in a closed vacuum. So without energy being added to the system from outside, energy can only go from usable to non-usable. It can't be created or destroyed, but it can be converted from usable to non-usable. Everything uses energy. The planet just solely existing uses energy. Things staying frozen, the sun burning, the stars that are in the sky, birds flying, everything uses up energy to stay in motion. But if those things have all been going for eternity past, then they've all should have used up energy by now. Even the slowest trickle of energy in this finite vast of energy should have used it all up by now. It would be like even having a kid with a straw and a siphon pump at the large. Let's I don't know of a lake that is self-contained off the top of my head. I know there's one in like Arizona or California that is like the only place that has this like prehistoric fish in it, but there's no inlet, there's no outlet. It's just a stagnant lake. And imagine that is the usable amount of energy. And let's say we only have one kid with a little hand pump pumping out water. And you see him sitting there pumping. And you looked at me and you said, how long has he been there pumping out that water? And I said, oh, he's actually been there forever. As long as, just forever, eternity into the past, he's been sitting there siphoning out slowly energy from that water. You would know I was lying. One, because humans don't exist eternally. But imagine in this scenario he did. You would say there's still water in there. There's no water coming in. There's no water going out other than what he's pulling out and switching it over to this other lake, let's say. There's still water in there. So even how slow he's going, with infinite amount of time, he should have used it all and moved it over to the other water, the other lake. So that's how we know the past is finite, because there's still usable energy. Next point. So the universe has a cause, right? The universe has a beginning, and everything that begins has a cause. So the universe has a cause. What must it be like? Well, first, it must be uncaused. An infinite regression of causes is impossible. Remember, the first premise is everything that began to exist has a cause. Well, so therefore, the cause of the universe has to be beginningless, has to not have a beginning, i.e. uncaused. It needs to be spaceless. Remember at the Big Bang, time, space, matter, and energy all came into existence at a single point. So, spaceless, timeless, and immaterial, right? Since it is created space, time, and matter, it can't be space, time, and matter itself. Because if it's space, if it's spatial, without time, when did it put it? If it's spatial without material, then where did it put it? Same thing with all of it, is when, where, and what was put. So God must be timeless, or must be uncaused, spaceless, timeless, and immaterial. Next is unimaginably powerful. To bring an entire universe into being from nothing physical before, this, whatever it is, must be extremely powerful. Not only that, that thing must be extremely brilliant to know what the parameters it needed to make everything to be so finely tuned, which we'll see next week. And then finally, the thing that created the universe must be a person. This is the step that people often miss, and it's worth a slowing down and understanding. God must be uncaused, spaceless, timeless, immaterial, and all-powerful, but it also must be personal. A permanent cause should produce a permanent effect, unless the cause can freely choose to act. If the mechanism, let's say if it's a mechanism that causes the universe, it either clicks on or clicks off. It should have been doing that from eternity past, clicking on, clicking off, and creating. And if that's the case, it should have created us an infinite time amount ago. There should have been a beginning a long time ago, and we should be out of usable energy. So, if a cause is sufficient to produce itself, if a cause is sufficient to produce its effect, and that cause exists permanently, the effect should exist permanently too. If the temperature has been below freezing from eternity, any water around would have been frozen from eternity. It couldn't just start freezing at some point. The cause of the universe is timeless and permanent. So why isn't the universe itself just as permanent? Why did it begin only, as some put it, 13 point whatever billion years ago, instead of always existing alongside its cause? The only way to get an effect with a beginning from a cause that has no beginning is if the cause is a personal agent with freedom of choice or free will. Someone who can freely and spontaneously choose to act, rather than a cause that mechanically and automatically produces its effects. Freedom of the will is what lets a permanent, timeless cause produce a brand new effect at a particular moment. So what about God's infinity, right? So if the universe can't be infinite, why can God be infinite? People ask that. I've heard especially children ask that. This is a common and fair pushback. There's two versions of infinity: quantitative and qualitative. Quantitative is what we've been discussing. Quantitative infinity is a collection of made up infinitely many distinct parts, like Hilbert's Hotel, or subsequently counting every number into the past. That kind of infinity can't exist in reality. But qualitative infinity is different. When theologians say God is infinite, they mean he's maximally powerful, knowing, present, and morally perfect. He isn't a collection made up of infinite parts. So the Hilbert Hotel absurdities simply don't apply to God or his nature the way they apply to an infinite series of past events. So, quantitative, infinite parts, like Hilbert's Hotel, impossible in reality. Qualitative, infinitely powerful knowing, present, describes God, not a collection of parts. Thomas Aquinas believed that God had to be a simple being. He boiled down God to purely existence in and of himself. And he said that, well, if he had other properties, he would be a compilation. It would need a composer outside of himself. But when we say he's a qualitatively infinite, it means those parts of him, his justice, his goodness, his love, all of those things, is maximally powerful. He's all-knowing. He's personal. All of these parts, right, or attributes have always existed all together. They were not composed. They just are. So that would be a qualitative infinite. So why one creator? Why not many, right? The Romans and Greeks, of course, they believed in a myriad of gods, right? The God of the open door, God of the closed door, things like that. There's so many. But there's a thing called Occam's razor. Don't multiply causes beyond what is necessary. We should only infer as many causes as are necessary to explain the effect. One all-powerful creator is sufficient to explain the universe's beginning, so proposing additional creators adds nothing and is not warranted. The universe needs a cause. That cause looks a lot less like a force and a lot more like a person. So, thank you guys for being here again. I will try to be able to record this on Wednesday for our next week, which is fine-tuning and Pascal's wager. So we will see you guys probably Thursday.